Reggae Just Extra with Ras Dennis.
Sitting in the morning sun and watching all the birds.
After a long period of creative stagnation and business disputes with his record label, Peter Tosh was focused on rebuilding his reputation. His primary goal was to organize a concert tour at Madison Square Garden to promote his EMI America LP, No Nuclear War, which had been released in July. However, discussions between the record label and Tosh's business manager, Joe Borzicki, had not secured any advance funding for the concerts. With much of his income tied up in various legal battles, Peter and Joe decided to attempt borrowing the necessary funds. As Peter and his common-law wife, Marlene Brown, boarded a plane back to Kingston on September 6, 1987, he confided to close friends that the main reason for the tour was that he was broke. This is the untold story of Peter Tosh with Ras Dennis.
This is Reggae Just Extra, your #1 entertainment channel.
Peter Tosh was feeling isolated. His last concert in Jamaica took place in December 1985 at Kingston's National Arena. Since then, he had maintained a low profile, his music was rarely heard on JBC, and fellow musicians kept their distance. Many people at that time disliked Marlene Brown, Tosh's partner, who was allegedly accused for dabbling in obeah. Tosh had also severed ties with Bunny Wailer, accusing him of lowering the moral standards of reggae with his dancehall music.
Greatest sympathy to know that we've been so close together.
He criticized all singing toasters like Yellowman, as well as the newer dancehall DJs, referring to them as District John Crows. Additionally, Tosh's former friends had grown tired of his persistent anger and bitterness, particularly his ongoing lawsuits against EMI, Tough Gone Records, an old manager, and a Brazilian record label. A prime example of this was the collapse of his friendship with Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones in 1981. Tosh felt frustrated with his limited commercial success outside of Jamaica and began blaming the Stones for allegedly hindering his career, just as he had done with Bob Marley.
Bob will do all the leading. Don't care if he would write the song, arrange it, Bob would always take the leading position. And it would be very difficult for him to even get an opportunity to lead a song.
Keith Richards, who had let Tosh use his Jamaican residence for an extended period, initially ignored Tosh's public criticisms, dismissing them as expressions of professional frustration. However, Richards lost his temper when he arrived on the island for a vacation and found that Tosh had not notified him of his arrival. Tosh refused to leave Richards' hillside villa in Ocho Rios, claiming it had become his property. Eventually, Tosh did vacate the premises, but by then he was no longer welcome at Rolling Stones Records.
Due to unfavorable financial condition, I am unable to cope with this.
At this period, Tosh had lost a lengthy and difficult custody battle for his youngest child, one of his 8 children from various relationships. Additionally, his last house in Jamaica was burned down in 1986 by arsonists. He was now living in an expensive 2-story bungalow on Plymouth Avenue in Barbican, an upper-middle-class area of St. Andrew, a suburb of Kingston. His circle of friends had shrunk to include local craftsman Michael Robinson, bush doctor, and occult herbalist Wilton Doc Brown, JBC radio personality Jeff Free I. Dixon and his wife Joy, as well as drummer-percussionist Carlton Santa Davis. However, Tosh's home also attracted other types of visitors. These included buzzard higglers and bad beggarmen, who were often nuisances to Jamaican music personalities who had managed to escape, but not fully distance themselves, from the slums of West Kingston. These individuals stealthily infiltrated even the nicer suburban neighborhoods, skillfully balancing the roles of nuisance, sycophant, and a constant reminder of a troubled past. A savvy hustler on the streets would avoid disrupting suburban life, gliding through the tidy surroundings like a phantom while ensuring that former slum residents remained aware of their shared history and highlighting the fact that both the social climbing reggae star and the street beggar were outsiders in their own right. Tragically, the morning after Peter Tosh and Marlene Brown returned to Barbican, they were visited by Dennis Lepo Laban, a higgler and self-styled dub poet whose criminal activities in West Kingston had long paralleled Peter's rise as a performer. The 32-year-old thug, whose smirking and intimidating demeanor bore a slight resemblance to the singer, had been seeking cash and favors from Tosh since the early 1970s. Over the past 2 years, Tosh had given Laban money to help preserve his catch at 2 Crescent Road in the ghetto and to support a child of Laban's partner. On that muggy Monday morning in September, Laban came to complain that Marlene Brown's brother, Dennis, had failed to uphold his end of a bargain involving promised assistance. The fact that their first visitor upon returning home was someone asking for favors infuriated the hot-tempered Marlene. She grimly expressed her frustrations by stating that she didn't want Peter, herself, or anyone else to end up dead. This acrid jest was related to the recent murder by one of Lepo's associates of a couple from whom the friend had been extorting money, as well as to the police killing of the extortionists just 1 week prior. Before their trip to New York, Tosh had been expressing his anxiety in front of Marlene and others, complaining that the grounds of the house had begun to smell like death, a concern she never fully understood. Lepo let the matter drop, but stayed on the premises until late afternoon, smoking spliffs and lounging on the white wicker settees in the narrow living room, which was dominated by photo portraits of Haile Selassie and Tosh. Lepo had been a rude boy since his teens, earning his first 3-month jail sentence for vagrancy in 1971. In May 1974, he was sentenced to a substantial prison term of 15 years for 3 separate counts of robbery with assault. 2 months later, the Kingston Home Circuit Court convicted him of assault with intent to rob, robbery with aggravation, shooting with intent to kill, and wounding with intent to kill. The minimum aggregate sentence for his spree of larceny and attempted murder was 25 years of hard labor, but Lepo served only 12 years and 5 months before being paroled on October 5, 1986. If all went well, his parole would expire on June 6, 1991. On September 11, 1987, at 7:30 p.m., Lepo made his second visit to Peter Tosh's residence. This visit turned brutal and resulted in the shooting and killing of Peter Tosh and 2 others. Lepo reportedly blamed everything on Marlene Brown, claiming that it was her obeah that had brought about the violence, spells that had prevented Peter from providing his customary alms to the bad men. "You're dead for this tonight," he vowed. Long story short, when Peter was pronounced dead, hospital authorities and police became eager to locate his next of kin. Friends and fans informed them that while his parents might still be alive, Peter had not seen either of them in more than 20 years. Detective Sergeant Hugh Miller of the Halfway Tree Police Station was assigned to investigate the shooting, which resulted in the deaths of Tosh and Wilton Doc Brown. 3 days later, on Monday, September 14th, Sergeant Miller's case became a triple murder when Jeff Free-Eye Dixon succumbed to his injuries while still in a coma in the intensive care unit at University Hospital. The following day, Mrs. Alvera Koch, Peter's mother, arrived at his home in Barbican to discuss funeral arrangements with Marlene Brown. When Marlene answered the door, she confronted Mrs. Koch using harsh language, blaming her for abandoning Peter during his infancy. Mrs. Koch tried to propose burying Peter in his native parish of Westmoreland, but Marlene refused to entertain the idea, ending their conversation with the words, "I don't like you, and Peter doesn't like you either." Marlene Brown had made plans for Peter Tosh's remains to be buried at Dovecot Memorial Park on Constant Spring Road in Kingston. However, on Wednesday, September 25th, she received a call from the Prime Minister's office, informing her that she had no legal right to custody of the body and must comply with Alvera Koch's wishes to have Peter buried in the village of Belmont, Westmoreland. Marlene belittled the new burial site, claiming it was situated next to Koch's pigsty. In response, Tosh's mother clarified to the local press that the grave and pen were separated by at least 3 chains, a common Jamaican measure equivalent to 66 feet, or used to indicate distances of less than a mile. On Friday, September 25th, Peter Tosh was laid out in state at the Kingston National Arena, where numerous mourners paid their respects to the toughest. During the funeral, 2 men emerged, both claiming to be Peter's father. One, Alfred McIntosh, supported Marlene Brown, while the other, James McIntosh, was later confirmed by Mrs. Koch to be Peter's actual father. James stated that he had met with Peter some years prior, that they had reconciled, and that they had spoken several times since then. Kingston remained tense following these events. This unease was exacerbated on Friday, October 2nd, when reports circulated that Marlene Brown had narrowly escaped harm after being ambushed while pulling her car into her driveway. She claimed that 4 men in a car, armed with M16 rifles, had fired at her as they sped away in the darkness. Meanwhile, Lepo was sentenced to death by hanging, despite maintaining his innocence throughout the trial, even as he was implicated by survivals of the attack, as well as the driver who had taken him to Tosh's house. That's all for this episode, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, give a thumbs up, and leave a positive comment in the section below, and I'll see you again very soon for another important video.
Many thanks for watching Reggae Just Extra with Ras Dennis.